Welcome to part 3 of this read-through and peer review of Kent Hovind's doctoral dissertation, which was published on wikileaks.org on December the 9th, 2009. If you have not yet seen the first two parts, then I recommend that you go back and see those first, as this episode will start off exactly where the last one finished. Now, in an earlier video we mentioned the fact that Kent's dissertation doesn't seem to follow the standard form, style and structure of such a document, and that before the introduction he should have had a table of contents. Well, it's at this point that we find that table of contents where Kent has listed out the contents of each chapter within the introduction. So the following 2 pages is actually a listing of the contents of the rest of the dissertation. The fun thing is that there's a little surprise about this, but I'll go into that in more detail later on. Anyhow, let's delve back into that crap. The red arrow marks where we left off in the last video and where we start in this one. The chapters and consequently the subject matter of the book begins by discussing the history of evolution. Now, if this gets anywhere near factual and accurate, I am going to be very surprised. Where did we get this crazy idea anyway? Well, it's not going to be Charles Darwin if Kent has anything to do with it. It's probably going to be Satan. The second chapter deals with the fact that evolution is a religion and not a science, and therefore should be excluded from public school curricula. Well, okay, seeing as the premise is completely inaccurate, I would presume that the entire second chapter of his book is also going to be inaccurate, just like Kent's grammar. I'm sure the word "the" should be in there somewhere. The third chapter deals with the effects of evolution. What has the teaching of evolution brought to the world in the way of good or harm? Now, I'm willing to put good money on the fact that nowhere in that chapter does it mention the advances to biological and biomedical sciences alone over the last 150 years. In the fourth chapter, we deal with the subject of time. How old is the Earth? Now, anybody familiar with Kent's work just knows that this chapter is going to be wrong. I mean, Kent believes the world is no older than 6,000 years old, so it's just going to be wrong. It's just going to be a chapter full of bullshit. But there's more fun to come. You see, I've read to the end of Kent's doctoral dissertation, and you see, it becomes apparent when you reach the end of his dissertation that once he reached the end of chapter 4, the chapter about time, he obviously ran out of time and was unable to finish it. You see, Kent lists another 12 chapters. Unfortunately, he hasn't written any of them. So if we carry on, in the 5th chapter we discuss the Big Bang Theory. In actual fact, we don't. In the 6th chapter, we give information about the geologic column, the foundation of all evolutionary teaching, which it isn't, and it doesn't. In chapter 7, we answer questions about radiocarbon dating, but he spent so much time on the radio that he would. Chapter 8 gives the truth about cavemen, which I presume was going to be about the Flintstones, but unfortunately, it too is missed. Chapter 9 discusses the best evidence evolutionists have for evolution, that is, our doctorate. But as we all know, Kent doesn't believe there is any evidence for evolution. And likewise, there's no chapter. Chapter 10 answers the question, has science created life in the laboratory? Unfortunately, there's no answer. There's no chapter 10. And then we continue on. We took 10 chapters of the book to destroy the edifice of evolution and clear away the rubble so that we could build on a clean foundation. No, you didn't, Kent. You only wrote as far as chapter 4. What happened, Kent? Was the challenge too much for you? In your dedication, you say that when you felt like giving up, your wife urged you otherwise. Did you just go down into the study and tell her that you were writing but gave up anyway? Several legitimate questions about the creation account given in the Bible need to be answered, along with the question of where exactly have you answered it? Number 1. Quote, don't all scientists believe in evolution? End quote. Well, it's a shame you didn't answer that one, Kent, because I'm quite sure that that would have been entertaining, because after all, I don't think that quote and that question is in the Bible. In chapter 11 we discuss scientists past and present who were creationists. Only you don't. In chapter 12 we answer a commonly raised complaint. Quote, Genesis 1 conflicts with Genesis 2. End. What happened, Ken? Did Miss Kim Van Gumby give in? Did she look at what she was typing and say, this is bullshit, I can't type this no more? In chapter 13, we give interesting evidence that dinosaurs are mentioned in the Bible. And as they're not, likewise, they're not mentioned in chapter 13 either. Like the rest of everything else in chapter 13 that you didn't write. I believe that dinosaurs are not only in the Bible, but they have lived with man all through his 6,000-year history. Oh man, it's just a shame he never wrote that chapter. I mean, the fun we could have had with that. In chapter 14, we deal with the question, are dinosaurs extinct? Well, we deal with the question, you didn't. You never wrote chapter 14. In chapter 15, we discuss the human and dinosaur footprints found together in Glen Rose, Texas. Well, they never found dinosaur and human footprints together in Glen Rose, Texas, just like we've so far been unable to find chapter 15. In chapter 16, we give the creationist alternative theory to explain the geologic features of the Earth within a 6,000-year framework. Now, obviously, you must have thought that was a load of bullshit too, and we're presuming that's why you never wrote chapter 16, while all of the evidence is not in yet. And ain't that the truth? Like 3/4 of your dissertation ain't in yet. I feel it is still the best option to take God's word at face value. Yes, Kent, I am sure you do. And in all seriousness, that is why people like you are so bloody dangerous. The Bible has never been proven wrong yet, and I believe it never will. Well, you've got to give it to our Kent. He likes to go out on a high. And with a high like that, I want to know what he's been smoking. I mean, you've got to admire a bold statement of assertion like that, especially as it flies in the face of all of the evidence. I mean, remember Galileo, he proved that the Earth goes around the Sun and not the other way round. Maps might have 4 corners, but the Earth doesn't, and dig all you want, you are not going to find the foundations of the Earth. Anyway, that's the end of the introduction. For our next video, it gets really messy. We're moving on to chapter 1.